Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Culture Queens. This is Dr. Christina Edmondson, and I am really excited to answer this first blog question. And so you see it above the video, but I'm going to read it to you. Dear Culture Queens, I'm a white woman who was riding the city bus last year. At the time of the ride, I was on a pretty full bus and was the minority. Since sitting close to me were three African American females, grandmother, mother, and young daughter, about 4 or 5 years old. The grandma and mother were berating the young daughter for asking a question. The young girl began to cry, and so the grandma and mother harshly criticized her for crying and kept telling her to stop crying. The girl was obviously crushed and was unable to completely stop crying. I felt so much compassion for the young girl and wanted to reach out to her by talking to her or giving her something of mine, candy or food that I had, but did not feel the freedom to do so since I was paralyzed with the reality of who I was, white, and what kind of response I would get from the older women who were black. I was frustrated and no one else intervened either. What would have been a great way to help or a good way to help without offending? So I think this is a great question, and I think there's so many layers to it. But a couple things that I want to just talk about before I get into, I think maybe what's the most important part of this conversation, which is the little girl who you felt like you really wanted to help, or you felt compelled to help her. But before we get into that, let's just talk about some of the dynamics on the bus. So here you are as a majority person, you self-identify as a white woman on a bus of, I'm assuming, mostly African Americans or people of color. So typically in these settings, right, if there is a behavior that a person of color is exhibiting that doesn't seem too great, it's quite possible that your very presence as a white woman could have been one of the reasons why no one intervened. It could have been a decision not to embarrass these mothers in front of you. That's just one hypothesis. But it may not have been that consciously aware either. It could have been that the parenting style that they were evoking is one in which they were quite authoritarian and they were toughening that little girl up. And there are lots of cultures who engage in parenting and discipline styles that really are designed to toughen up children. Why would you ask that children of color need to be toughened up? Well, we have a racialized and racist society. And so oftentimes parents, particularly African American parents, who have a higher likelihood to use what are considered more strict disciplinary standards and behaviors, those parents are preparing their children to face the realities of this world. So it's possible that what you interpreted as a really harsh parenting style is a product of the fear of raising a child in a society that's racist. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that verbal abuse and child abuse are acceptable in any community, right? They're definitely unacceptable. And I think it's a great inclination that you had to want to help this kid. And I think it was also a good inclination to know that you, in your whiteness, were potentially at a disadvantage, or you needed to be really thoughtful and pause before intervening into this situation. So let's get back to this little girl who's about 4 or 5 years old. And as you interpret, as I'm interpreting your story, is really heartbroken. Your words are crushed by the words of her mother and grandmother. And I'd also probably throw in really embarrassed if there's a bus full of people on it and you're getting chewed out. So what could you have done? So the clinician in me says, pulling from personal experience of being in settings like the grocery store or the bus and other places where people are saying things to their kids that are pretty damaging, but not wanting to disrespect the parents, certainly in front of their child, but also not wanting to trigger a crazy response from a person that I don't know, and nor do I have the authority and permission to speak into their lives. Kind of a subtle intervention that I do is to smile at the child, or if appropriate, speak directly to the kid. Now, this isn't a way to dismiss or disrespect the parents, but it is a way to remind the kid that the kid's a child and subtly remind the parents that this is a child too. So something that I've said maybe at the grocery store might be like, look at those cool shoes. Like, I wish I had a pair of shoes like that. Or you remind me of my little girl, right? And that's a quick way to get everyone in that setting to remember we're talking to a 4 or 5 year old. Now, with that being said, people have all kinds of personalities and moods and attitudes. So who knows? And you've got to play it by ear. But you were right to note the cultural dynamics of your own whiteness and thinking about what's the best way for you to intervene. So I hope this answer was good enough. But if not, don't worry. Hopefully, there'll be some other suggestions in the comments section below. At the end of the day, oftentimes we have questions about cultural engagement, and we feel pretty anxious about where we can ask those questions and get answers that don't cause us to feel like we shouldn't have asked the question in the first place. So, here at Ask the Culture Queens, there are no bad questions, and hopefully, we have halfway decent answers. So, thanks for participating, and I look forward to hearing more questions from people in the future. Take care.